Hello, everyone. This is Susan Arant with the Gene Arant Team, Keller Williams in Austin, Texas. And today we're going to do an interview with a past client, well, current client. She hasn't quite closed yet, Jeannie Osnes. She was living in Austin, Texas, and has moved to Eugene, Oregon to be with her baby and her grandbaby, which I've met that baby, and I can understand why she would leave beautiful Austin, Texas to move to beautiful Oregon. So Jeannie, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you.
Yes. And the reason for this video, she actually went through the experience of purchasing her Oregon home virtually and then being in the process of going on the market here in Austin with us when all of the, what would you call it?
Shelter in place happened.
There we go, yes. And ultimately ended up selling in those circumstances and moving. And we're still we're finishing up and closing, I think, in a week, 2 weeks?
About 10 days, I think. Yeah.
So there we go. So Jeannie, let's take it away.
All right.
I have a list of questions here. So I was thinking we'd start with the buy side.
Okay.
And what it was like for you looking for a home in a state that far away virtually.
Yeah, well, it's about 2,200 miles away. So I had been to this town that I've moved to before because my daughter and her husband and child live there. So I'd been in the city before, so I knew a little bit about, I had a little bit of bearings. I mean, to this day, I can't tell you which is north, south, east, or west. I'm still figuring that out. But I've been in the town enough that I knew that, I could see living here one day. I actually was never thinking that, but that you just kind of subconsciously, oh yeah, if I'm going to move, yeah, that would be a place I'd be interested in. So I had a little bit of knowledge of the area. So when we started talking about me moving here, what I did is I had to find a real estate agent, and then I went through all of kind of a needs analysis as to what I would be looking for. I sent pictures to my agent as to what my current house looked like, and my daughter knew, so that they could kind of get more and more of a feel of what I'm looking for. And then we started shopping for houses.
So how did you, when you say shopping for houses, like what does that look like?
Yeah, so my agent started working with taking my needs analysis, and he was going through the MLS and even for sale by owners and such, finding a home that he felt would be a good fit for me, knowing my age, my marital status, the fact I have 2 dogs, what kind of outdoor living I enjoy. And so he started sending me some of the different current listings that were on the market for me to start to go through and get a little bit more familiar and looking at the maps and where is this located in that town and things like that. And then I actually went under contract twice. So I found one home that I liked a lot. And so what they then did is we just FaceTimed it. So he took me through and we did FaceTime and walked me through every room. I mean, we looked at even from the front door knob to the backyard and how big is it and all the bathrooms. And I could say, oh, wait, turn to the left, turn to the right. I actually felt like I was in the house. And so there was nothing that I felt like I'd be surprised at. So I actually went under contract with that home. It fell apart in inspection. And so we started the process over again, and then found that the house that I ended up buying, we did the exact same thing. So I bought the house in Oregon that I'd never set foot in it. Everything was done virtually. I never went to an office. I never met with my real estate agent. The only thing that I actually did in person is I had a notary that came to where I was living in Austin, sat 6 feet away from me, talked through the closing paperwork. I signed everything. He left, and that was the only personal interaction, like face-to-face interaction I had through the entire transaction.
So you never went to see the house even at the end before closing?
I owned the house for 10 days before I ever walked into it.
Wow. So
Yeah.
What was it like when you walked in? Was it what you expected?
It was, it was exactly what I expected, because they did a great job walking me through the property and showing me, here's all the things that you're going to need to address. Here's the things that are really cool. Here's what's new. Here's what's old. I mean, we had walked around the front, the back, every window. There was no surprise when I got into the house at all.
That's great. Did you have any of those calls with your inspector? Did he do any of that stuff with you too, or was that mainly your agent and your daughter?
My inspector, actually, I know him also, and he was also involved in helping to find the house. And then he got into the house immediately after we went under contract. I think the very next day, he was in the house doing a preliminary inspection just to tell me if he thought you should actually really go through with this, and because I needed professional eyes to look at it because I couldn't. And so his first quick walkthrough, he said, yes, we should keep moving forward. So then we did a full inspection. He walked me through that, sent me pictures, got on the phone, talked to me about everything that he's got concerns about, things that he thinks are solid, things to watch for within a few years. You might need something here. And then so we went back to the sellers, told them here's our items that we're a little bit concerned about. They were really, one of the things, Susan, that I found that I don't think I've ever purchased a house with the buyer and the seller working so well together. We both wanted to make this happen because we both didn't know what's going to happen in the next 30, 60, 90 days. And so we really worked well together and found win-win for me as the buyer and them as the seller. And so the inspection, it pretty much felt like every inspection I've ever been to in purchasing a home, except that I wasn't physically there. I was just there on camera.
Wow. So do you, obviously it all worked out. Do you feel like there was any apprehension with your lender or with the seller with the fact that you hadn't seen it in person, that they were concerned about you actually being a real buyer, or the lender being, okay, is this house really something I want to loan money on?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was zero concern about that. I used Keller Mortgage, and I used the same loan officer that I'd used several times in the past. So he also knew me and knew the situation, so there was no apprehension there. The sellers had already moved. It was interesting. They moved to Texas, which is where I lived, and I moved to Oregon where they lived, and they had already moved. And they were just thrilled that they actually had a real buyer. Right as, I mean, like literally the day I think that I left Texas is the day that the shelter in place started. So there was I never felt any apprehension from them of knowing that somebody's purchasing it that never walked in it. And quite frankly, I don't know if they don't know that I've never been in it. We didn't call them to say, hey, by the way, I've never actually set foot in the house.
Right. One thing that I've heard you say a couple times, it's about people that you've done business with and you know.
Right.
Having those relationships with your inspector and the lender. How did you go about finding and deciding on an agent out of state? Was this someone you knew, or was this someone new?
Yeah, that same thing is I went with someone that I did reference checks. I talked to my inspector, I talked to my daughter, I talked to some other agents to make sure that I had a strong agent that would really advocate for me, and then interviewed him twice before I actually decided to go with him.
Okay.
And that brings up another thought is there was some things that had to be done to the house for our inspection. And I just leaned very heavily on my inspector of who are the vendors and the contractors that you know. And so it was very much a relationship driven transaction because I was very dependent on the people that were doing these things for me. So the relationships were vitally important for me.
Yeah. Well, speaking of relationships, then we have the opportunity in going into relationship with you to help you sell your home.
Right.
And so let's transition into that, what that looked like for you. Again, you can sell a house virtually anytime. We don't have to have a pandemic to happen for that to be a need. However, adding that element to it, how was that for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you and I first started talking and I was talking with Gene about listing the house, we weren't in the pandemic. I think we started talking maybe in February about it, and I was like I decided I wanted to move, and then we were, talking a little bit more and more about it. And do I move out first? Is it okay to have a vacant house? But if I have a furnished house, I have this dog here that's not people friendly. So we were already in this conversation. And we had already decided, yes, I'm actually going to move out of the house in order to sell it. And so, and it wasn't until those decisions were made I'd already met with your stager at that time. We already had a time for photos to be done, and then the pandemic hit. So, you know, the thing is that I kept reminding myself is buying and selling virtually is not new. It's just that we're all doing it now. So, I mean, I have bought and sold investment properties in the past that I never stepped into. I've sold properties that I wasn't there present when it was happening. So it's not new. It just was with my own personal house. So it just seemed to flow extremely well.
Yeah. So bringing up that point of it has been happening, what are some things that maybe you worried about that ended up not needing to be worried about? Or
yeah.
Right word.
One thing that I worried about, and it turned out to actually be a benefit, was selling my house, not having it staged with furniture. Now we did, you know, on your advice, we did do a lot of the photos prior to me moving my furniture out, but selling, you know, we all know that selling an unfurnished house sometimes doesn't get as high of a dollar as those that are furnished. And yet, it just so happened that once my home was actually on the market, the shelter in place was put in place. And so people are more apt to go through vacant homes because there's nobody else there, you know, breathing their COVID-19 cooties all over the place. Yeah. And so that was something I really didn't need to worry about. The other thing I worried about was my furniture. And so now my furniture is in a moving truck and it's somewhere in Texas and they can't deliver it. And this was around May or March 20th, I believe. And they told me that they can't deliver till April 7th because of different moves and how they have to get it all lined up. Well, the country was shutting down more and more and more and more. And I thought, am I ever going to get I have no idea where all of my belongings are. I moved with 2 pair of jeans and 5 t-shirts. And suddenly now I'm for 3 weeks doing a lot of laundry. The same thing over and over and over. So that was something that I really worried about is, will they be able to actually get out of Texas? Will they be able to go through Utah? I mean, the states were closing their borders and, you know, those kinds of things. And that was an unnecessary worry because they came, it was fine. They were right on time. It was really simple. They did a great job. I think it was, you had recommended the movers that I used. And it was really cool is even the movers were checking in with me every few days. How you doing? This is where we are. This is when we still plan to show up. So there was a lot of communication with me to make sure that I wasn't, you know, making it bigger in my head than it actually was.
So now you're in Oregon, you're all moved in, your furniture's there, you get to visit your grandbaby.
Yep.
Your Texas house is selling in 10 days.
Yep.
Is there anything that you can share to give people peace about the process? I mean, you've done a great job sharing that all along, but any last words on the virtual viewing and showing of homes for buyers? And then, as you mentioned, we all know everyone sits on the computer. I mean, I go through and look at and do most of my shopping online at this point. So why does a house have to be any different? But anyway, any last words of advice?
What I would say is, actually, as a buyer and as a seller, this was actually, I mean, I don't want to minimize at all what we're going through as a planet. And yet this was actually a phenomenal time to sell my home because people were taking their homes off the market. They were not sure, how can we do showings? Is this actually going to work? I know that not Keller Williams, but some other companies were saying we're not listing or buying any properties. And actually, I found it was actually a fantastic time to list. I think that the Gene Arant team had my home under contract. We only had 1 physical showing on the property, and those are the people that we went under contract with, and it was within like 3 days. I think it's actually a really great time to list because what we found is there's only serious buyers out there. There's none of the looky-loos, people that are looking at homes, you know, actually walking through homes because they want decorating ideas. I mean, only serious buyers are out there, people that have to buy. And so it's actually a great time to sell because you might be able to get top dollar, and there's still a lot of buyers out there that have to buy, and the inventory is really low. So I would say if I was to do it all over again, absolutely, I would list right now. And then the buying portion of it, it was as flawless as it could be. You're always gonna have little bumps along the way, but there was nothing that kept me up at night that I was super worried about. We closed on time. It went as smooth as every in-home purchase or sell that I've ever done. And I've done a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. It definitely is helpful. And you were right. Inventory is ridiculously low, and there are people needing to buy. People always need to buy and sell. And, you know, even if it's a vacant house now, you know, marketing a vacant is even more, people look at that more. You know, we used to hide that it was a vacant. Now it's like, it's vacant, it's vacant. You can come walk through it. But even if you can't walk through it, with the 3D tours and all of those things, it's pretty amazing.
Well, and there's so many precautions now that I'm seeing. People are putting on little booties and wearing masks and gloves. I mean, it's no more dangerous than going to the grocery store, and we're all still doing that. So yeah, I would just say, if you need to buy or sell right now, it's still a fine time to be able to do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Well, you are so welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.